Everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today we're actually getting into a discussion in relation to another YouTube channel. The channel goes by the name No Fugazee Podcast. Some of you guys may have heard of it before. The host is named Cooley. And the reason why we're jumping into this right now is because this person had made a statement on another podcast called Tonight's Conversation, which is also a very popular YouTube channel that is in the same kind of talking space about relationships, about advice, life advice, or whatever the case is. So, as always, on that person's channel, the No Fugazi podcast channel, they're always talking that kind of red pill space, propionate space, even though it's relationship information, we'll call it, but for the most part, it's usually framed inside this kind of like battle of women versus men to some degree of the points because the host is a male. And he went on this other podcast, as always, very similar to his own podcast, where he has all these, striking points in regards to, the way men carry themselves versus the way women carry themselves and whatnot. But he went to take that same lingo onto this other podcast called Tonight's Conversation, where in the clip he references what's a high value man, and there's a female who's kind of talking opposition to him, and she states to the effect of that, well, someone who's talking the way he talks, which essentially is almost like arrogant, is the way she was kind of like putting, just to sum it up, how she was receiving it, that it's not enough for you to be a guy who's over 6 feet tall, make over six figures, and any other kind of thing you have going on that makes you quote unquote high value. But there was the aspect of saying that it's more than just that this is what the female's talking point was, that it's more than just that. It's your character, it's all that kind of other stuff, the way you're raised, the way you talk to people, the way you treat people, and X, Y, and Z. um and I may get into another video on why her points, to me, though they sound nice in general, society doesn't tend to run like that. No one tends to, you know, uh, um, go by that standard in terms of people being genuine in terms of the relationship world. But that will be for another video. So the main issue became that clip went viral of him afterwards saying, well, essentially, you do the math. I'm a high value guy because I meet these requirements. And that just kind of is what it is by the numbers, by the percentage. There's not a lot of people who are over 6 foot something. There's not a lot of people who are make over figures. He's also a black male, so that reduces the number if you are looking particularly for a black male. So with that, he said, you be the judge of the numbers. And it went viral. Now, the thing about it is, after it went viral, a lot of people, I guess, started doing some research on him. And they knew of his channel. That wasn't a big deal. They started doing research on him. And then another content creator by the name of O'Shea Duke Jackson, if I have that correct, uh, kind of revealed that what he was talking about didn't really make sense. He started saying things like women who are mothers are recreational purposes only, which is fine if that's his opinion. But at the same time, where the issue came into play was that they later on found out that his background, he is dating a white female who has two children already from a prior relationship. So everything he's talking are talking points that he doesn't live by. So it really becomes an issue of standing on what it is that you live by. And later on, they say that there was clip out there where he tries to say that his situation is the exception, but nonetheless, it's not one of your strong talking points that you don't address in your videos on a regular basis, in terms of starting with that. When you start to into that rhetoric of this and that about women, you should start by saying, this is my experience first, and not all women are like this, or whatever the case is, to at least say that on most of his videos. That way it would give some context, but he never does that. And come to light, he has two different channels, one with his significant other, and then one where he does his own No Fugazi podcast, where he is pretty much trashing on some of the ways of women. And I don't mean to necessarily say it like that, but it becomes that when you don't even stand on those beliefs. Now it's just talk. So that's just to sum it up. And I want to just kind of get into this subject. Now that I kind of broke that down, um, he's receiving a lot of flack, and it's funny because a lot of people in those talking spaces, as of recent, who go to extremes, are also receiving a lot of flack because it wasn't that long ago that you had on the Fresh and Fit podcast, uh, the one who's titled Fresh, as they go under that moniker of Fresh and Fit, the one who goes under the moniker of Fresh, essentially did the same thing. He got with somebody. He would talk about certain people on his, the people come on his podcast, because the same type of podcast, and would speak bad about these women. Nonetheless, got with a woman who was using him, and pretty much fell for all the same things. And I think it's just really important that if you're going to speak on a certain way, you got to be about that. If you're not, then essentially not only are you putting the wrong information out there, and it's definitely from a business standpoint, you're going to ruin your entire channel. Everyone says that his channel is going to be ruined at this point because he's completely opposite of what it was that he tried to present out there of himself. But in addition to, this is also a reason why it's not always good to talk in such strong talking points, or even at the least say you wish it wasn't this way, even if that's how the majority of the world looks like, or you see things that don't look a certain way or don't look positive. Do not speak in a way where, at least definitely not out to the world in a setting like a podcast, of to say so harshly, this is how it is, this is what it is, as opposed to say, I wish it wasn't this way, but this is what I see. This is my experience. And this is the reasons why it is an issue. Now, the point of what he was saying, I don't think necessarily is an issue if he stood on that, or at least had like I said, brought some kind of context to the situation. Now, I hear a lot of guys who will sometimes say that they don't date single mothers, and some of them just say that, and they don't go into detail what their reason is. Though sometimes people just simply say it's because of baggage. Um, I get that it's not ideal for some. Here's my thoughts on that, just a little tidbit, because I'm not going to go into deep on it. It's more so about the fact that you have someone, the topic is really someone who's saying a point and then kind of going back on it, and living a different life, or living a lie from what it is that they're putting out there. My thoughts when it comes to that whole thing is, not everybody is the same. So you can find a really good person who happens to have kids, and they maybe tried for a serious relationship and it didn't work out. There is definitely a difference between someone's history. You look at someone's history, and if a person is a type who went through a lot of different relationships and they had children, a man might be cautious. I'm just speaking from the standpoint of the man, because that was the reference that YouTuber Cooley had stated, and why he was getting the flack. So a person who um, a person who might say to themselves, okay, like I said, I don't, that situation, depending on their dating history, they could be someone who ran through a lot of people. They happen to get pregnant, but they were living a messy life, is one thing. And it's one aspect of why a lot of people, or a lot of guys, might fear that scenario. It's a different scenario where a person, say, was with one person, they were maybe married, they were with that person for 10 years, and all of a sudden things didn't work out and now they're single. It's definitely a different background. It's definitely a different personality that goes along with that. That's someone who tried, it didn't work out. It doesn't mean that they're, quote unquote, as people like to say, for the streets. That may not have been the case. So sometimes it's a case to case basis of understanding the difference. The part where a lot of people use that term for and get really worried is the ones who are going from one relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, and they have a child, and they're introducing more men into their future and in their lives. And it's just from one to the next, and they don't evaluate how serious those men are. So now you're just going from one situation to another. That is also, in all honesty, a bad look for the kids, for what they receive. I'm not going to go as far as to say it makes you a bad parent, but it's usually frowned upon because the kids are going through an experience where they see this revolving door of different people coming into the door, along with the fact that it shows that person's thinking, their capacity for thinking and evaluating the situations that they get in. Either they're doing it for selfish reasons, or they're not capable of assessing these situations that they go from one bad thing to the next, and don't take a moment to slow down and go, wait a minute, something's wrong. And the common denominator factor is me. So let me slow down and figure out what I'm doing wrong, who I'm selecting. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why a lot of people would say that. Another factor that my thoughts on it is that in today's society, and I spoke about this before when I spoke at the subject of courting, and the concept that, to me, like, this quote unquote courting culture where people think that that's a thing, and I disagree with it. It's a thing that you do when you're 15 to 20 years old, and after that, you're not supposed to court again, because that's how, like I said, you look at our grandparents, and I use that as evidence. So for anyone who might say that sounds crazy, people should be courting all the time, especially if women say people should be courting all the time, or men who will say, "Oh yeah, you're supposed to court." If you take a page out of the book from where our grandparents were around, they would generally get together and stay together from whether it's 20 years old, 25 years old, and they stayed together from then all the way to probably the point that they died, or like 50 years old, 50 years together, or whatever the case is. And you understood that when you look back at that reference, the grandparents didn't court 20 different people, because they were together forever. That's why they're your grandparents. Otherwise, they wouldn't be your grandparents. They probably would have not even had that situation. You wouldn't even probably be here. You know what I mean? Someone else would be here. Who knows? But the point is that that was the dynamic of it. And when I say that, I know most people can relate to that because they probably remember their grandpa and grandma being together for a long period of time. Or even if they were the type who weren't together at some point in time, they probably didn't separate for a till the point where they were together for like 30 years, 40 years. And if it did fall out, it was way after they tried for a long time. So my point to that is, there was never a courting phase. I'm going on a rant a little bit now, but what my original point with that was that, so this kind of space now where you might have people in their later age, we'll say 30 and up, get with someone who is a single parent, and in this case a single mom. If they're looking for somebody to bear the weight with them, this was not necessarily a common thing in tradition, because tradition, you were supposed to be with someone, stay with them for as long as you could. But if you had to be able to take care of your own kid, because you were single, then if you were doing a good job in that, and I'm not questioning someone if they're doing a good job or not, but if you're doing that good job and you're holding your own, then when you find a partner, it should be for companionship, and it should not be for them to take care of you and your kid. You should be able to say, I already have that. I don't need you in my space to take care of me and my kid, because once we're adults, you should already been doing that. If you weren't, that's the reason why a lot of men see dating a single mom as a red flag. And I'm not speaking for everyone. Some people just say it just to say it's a red flag. These are my reasons why I would say, because this could apply to even a man. If a woman is dating a single dad man, uh, single father who is, obviously, like I said, a woman dating a man, um, could run into the same issue I'm saying, but I'm speaking on this from the perspective of a man. If a single mom has all her stuff together and she's taking care of her kid and she's like, I just want companionship, then it's different. Then I feel that as a man, you could view it differently when you both are over 30 years old, because now you're like, this person's not a burden to me. We're just here for companionship of each other. You don't need me for anything. There will be a time where maybe we'll build, but you should have already had your life mostly built already. Same with the man. And I think, for at least from my perspective and for those who will share this perspective, I think that's where like the big aspect of the weight of it comes from. But if a woman comes to the table with all her stuff, she's already taking care of kids, she's like, everything's good, then I don't see an issue with a single mom, in terms of the way that society generally, or men of, say, the red pill space generally view them, recreational only, like the No Fugazee podcast had mentioned, and many other podcasts has mentioned. They're just recreational only. I wouldn't necessarily say that, like I said, if they're holding their own. So you got to be able to distinguish that difference and just not make a blanket statement out there. But especially when you aren't living that life of that blanket statement, then it just really looks bad upon you to say that. You should have at least then softened the blow by saying something in advance, similar to what I just mentioned about how these are the reasons why you don't prefer it, but nonetheless, there are exceptions to the rule, and not just yourself, because he tried to say he's the exception to the rule and the woman he's with is the exception to the rule. No, you're supposed to say there are a lot of exceptions out there to the rule. They may not be easy to find, And, sometimes it may not be, and I'm just saying, speaking from this point, if he was to say this in a more politically correct way, sometimes it may not be worth the risk of finding the wrong person. So this is why we filter out certain things, and that's understandable. But nonetheless, it can be found. And I'm in that situation if he was to say it like that. But unfortunately, he didn't, because he's just trying to make money off of a group of people who have had bad experiences, in this case, men who've had bad experiences, and have them rage out, enhance and fuel that rage that they have for experiencing bad experiences, and saying like, okay, well, yes, let's stomp on quote unquote the opposition. When that in itself, like I said, if you're gonna go that hard with your statements, you better be living that life. It's the equivalent of, I don't know, a street thug who says I'm about that life, or like, like a rapper or something like that who says I'm about that life, and then all of a sudden he's caught outside and he's not about that life. It's, you can't you can't do that. It's going to destroy your brand, and that's essentially what happened to him. And at this point now, a lot of people feel that his brand is over, and I would agree on that, because you can't have so many videos talking that, and now a lot of people have just exposed you. So I just wanted to kind of make that a talking point. Like I said, really about just being real with what you put out there, and also for the people who are viewers of that stuff, don't fall victim to diving too heavy into these people who say this stuff wholeheartedly. You could have your opinions, and your opinions might be strong. That's fine. But don't, make sure that your opinions are your own, and that you're not doing it because someone is spewing that stuff on a podcast about their views, and it's not real what they believe in, without them articulating why they feel these ways and knowing that their true character. And sometimes we can't research all aspects of a character. So this coming out for a lot of people is just the luck of the draw that they were able to find that out. But it definitely goes to the point of saying, like, not everything is 100%. And even if you see this on a regular basis, the majority of something, still just know that you want your reasons to be your own. If you feel that way, that's fine, but make sure your reasons are your own. And even though you can take in the information that you hear from podcasts and stuff like that of their opinions, you can absorb that like any intelligent person would, and say, okay, I'll add that into my roster of thoughts, or my, a catalog of information. But just make sure it's something that the reasons for why you feel that way, and not just because somebody's saying it, because they may not be true in what they're saying. As always, you guys, like, share, comment, subscribe, be safe out there, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.